Hello, I am Evan Manning, and this is Parental Apathy, a case study for EDL 856. The first thing I wanted to highlight was a quote from the Wagner article that we had read previously in the material, which was motivating a school is an effort that lasts throughout the year. By focusing on instilling a positive school culture, principals can make these tasks manageable and fulfilling. I think this really highlights sort of the overall both future goal and maybe some underlying problems of the assumptions of the current principal, which is sort of missing out that that positive school culture drives not only the student buy-in, but then trickles down to the parents, which would then increase participation that everyone, including Mrs. Rose, and I do think the principal as well, are looking for. The first isolated thing that we were supposed to find is category one, the problem identification and analysis. There are two separate subheadings that we needed to isolate via the rubric. The first was what we know. Three things there were that Mrs. Rose is new in experience as she was a new administrator here, but she is also new in knowledge, specifically in the community relations and the school community relations field. The article indicated that this was the last class she took and therefore is in the forefront of her mind, which I think is important in knowing that she might be the expert in the SCR, even if she's not the expert in high school administration. Two is that the principal has sort of given in to the low turnout in the past. He seems sort of beaten down by that low turnout and not wanting to improve here. And three, that in the special meeting flyer that they handed out, and then the most recent meeting where Mrs. Rose was sort of a part of that process, low turnout happened yet again. So it wasn't just the past identification of the principal and sort of copping out to saying, oh, it's always been bad, but Mrs. Rose has now been a part of it as well. What we need to know first, why the hesitation by the principal? Has there been something that happened in the past? Why are we just sort of dismissing the idea that this improvement can happen? Two, do we have data for the other district schools? So not out of district, but inside that district. Is the turnout this low there as well? I think that's important to know for the ability to know if the community can sustain an improved model of turnout or if this is sort of an epidemic with the entire district and the way in which the district as a whole is trying to increase its communication. And three, do we have alternative communication methods available? This really sprung to me going back and looking at the archaic nature of the way in which the communication tried to occur, which was the flyer handed directly to the students. As we know, as educators, it's a pretty low, I think, turnout of the actual completion of the flyer to the parents. And when the parents get inundated with flyers from different schools, different siblings, then obviously things sort of get lost in translation, and maybe a more of a direct means of communication to the parents could be helpful, but we don't know if what specific mediums are available in the article. So that's something that we would need to know. I do think that my sort of overall take of the problem was, why is the increase of parent participation met with such negativity? I really think that there has to be some underlying issue there and a criticism that we need to be able to focus on. But again, without knowing that, that sort of limits where we can solve. Category two is the proposed plan of action with appropriate strategies for implementation. So the three individual steps I tried to isolate as per past texts that we have read were first, step one, getting more student buy-in as per step 5 of the Wagner article, which indicates that if you don't have the students buying in, then there's no incentive for the community to buy in as well. Step 2 is looking into the current community to understand future steps better as per the CTB, which was the Community Toolbox article that we read, specifically Chapter 3, Section 2 in a previous module. I think this is a big step that we can take for a tangible way to actually get some data that can drive the solutions in the future. If we know what the community is, how it functions, what the makeup is there, and get some data, then the district and the school board can collaborate on a means to actually increase this communication in a way that is tailored and targeted specifically for that community. And step 3, increasing communication avenues and pushing a comprehensive internal and external overhaul as per the Hampton District Guide. This was the Hampton K through 12 guide in Virginia that we read, which was written in 2001, and it uniquely outlined the increase of both not only internal but also external means of improving communication. Again, the internal can be for the staff and the students that are specifically on campus for flyers and internal email, but I think that the external increase of ways in which that we don't only view the communication archaically from directly to teacher or administration to parent, but also including communities such as social and church and religious groups and those sort of community outreach programs, as well as sort of an HR push to allow sort of increases of that information out and disseminating the information can be uniquely important. And with new mediums of social media really pushing and focusing on highlighting student achievement, which will not only improve that student buy-in, which was step 1 focus, but also the step 3 of getting the parents to see what's going on and why they need or want to be included in what's happening there. Category 3 was resolving the issues based on promoting the success of all students. So how does that resolution function? For me, looking at the rubric, we're trying to isolate 3 unique internal warrants here. So first, students need to buy in order to care if parents are in as well, and that intervention solves. Again, if the students feel like the culture of the school is inclusive of them and they're excited when they're coming home, then having information be disseminated to parents is much more likely. 2, we need to provide backup plans to protect the students' full-on responsibility. Again, the only medium isolated in the text was the students having to give that information to the parents directly. And although we'd love to see that happens, it not only puts a lot of pressure on them for success, but I also think without any sort of a backup plan, it puts too much pressure on the student individually, which is problematic. Step 3 solves that, though, by making sure that we protect with alternative mediums that would be provided, including but not limited to those social medias, Skyward, direct emails, HR correspondence to community outreach groups. 3, follow up with steps 1 and 3 after the community demographic data analysis is complete. This would allow for the disseminated information to be there to protect and reach the individual students in the building, which again increases the warranted analysis of the success for individual students if we're targeting information for their specific demographic needs and wants. Category 4 was debriefing and identifying some issues that are unresolved or open to further investigations. So a few subsections here isolated in the rubric. First is thinking. I'm thinking things should have been better early. I don't really understand why they weren't or why we let it get to this point. 2 is I'm thinking, is the plan feasible with the current head administrator? Again, you can sort of fake it till you make it in a lot of ways, but I don't know if you can fake it until you make it on the question of culture of a school. I think that that becomes important. If the head principal isn't going to buy into the cultural change and disseminating this information with the student buy-in focus, then will it be seen as a disingenuous act and will it be difficult for it actually to work? And if solvency gets mitigated by the lack of this continuity with the head administrator, that becomes a problem. And 3, is there a risk of parent revolt? Again, I have no reason to think that there would be, but that whole question of what is the underlying problem, what has happened before when we included parents and it failed and there was some sort of a disengagement of this communication culture between administration and parents, is there a risk? And I think that there obviously can be if we don't know all the data and the information, but I'm curious what that is, which we'll get to in a second, with unresolved or open issues. So again, that truth about the current administration, what is that? What are those issues that have come up? The truth about the community, which I think is solvent through step 2 of the action step, but again, as of right now, is unresolved until we get that data. And 3, will more student buy-in trickle up? Again, trickling down when you start with parents and hoping that they have some sort of power over the students is one thing, but trying to get the students to buy in and then that trickle up through the power dichotomy and through that pecking order as per an earlier module is more difficult, but I think that that's the way to go here. What am I feeling? I think there's a question of, am I overreacting? And that goes with 2, which was, do we have a real issue? There's no specific actually problem per se isolated. It's not like we have some parent revolt. So the question is there really a problem, or are we just upset because the turnout is low and that we're personifying that as being our fault when there really isn't an issue there? Sort of the no news is good news philosophy. And right now, I'm sure many administrations in different districts would love not having parent over involvement for issues. But again, that would be a feeling I have without knowing that data from unresolved or open. And things that we're valuing, the 3 C's: community, caring, and communication. Those are all 3 values that we're trying to focus on as sort of spearheading the model of solvency that we isolated. Category 5 is reflecting on that standard, providing evidence. I included the green quote here to really try to have that as a focuser for where I was looking at trying to provide warrants of solvency. So component 1 was academic success of all students. First, academic goals and reward have to be a part of the buy-in, and that focus has to come from the administrative staff. 2, buy-in helps academics, even if not the lone focus. And what I mean by that is that buy-in of the actual culture can provide a workplace for the students where they're so much more positive in their work ethic and in their environment that is going to improve academic success, even if the specific rewards aren't only focused in academia. And 3, communication throughout. Again, that parent advocacy has to be there, but that communication to them, not only from the students, but also directly through HR and social medias, is very important in order to try to help that academic success at home. If they don't know that that student success is achieving at school, then they can't get that reward. It starts a slippery slope. Component 2 was uniquely focused on well-being of all students. So 3 highlights there: the safety for students, fair for students to have backup through the inclusion of direct mediums to them, and 3, creating a better cohesive culture through the use of the communication and the buy-in protocols that would be introduced in the action steps. And then component 3, communities of engagement, which I think was a big focus on this specific case study. First, communication, internal and external improvements. Again, those were isolated specifically in past modules of that need through the Hampton study of the internal and external needing to be improved. And as we're not seeing much there that is currently utilized by that district, that's important. 2, the community background investment has targeted data. Again, once we get that physical, tangible data from the background check that you are doing on the school, defining the demographics and the information on that specific community, then we can target our interventions and engagements for them specifically. And 3, the rubric really focused on a clear and convincing ability to show and adapt to the information used in previous modules for the solution step. And I think that the inclusion of something that could be a tangible evidence is important. And again, with this specific case study, that's very easy to do because we already have what the numbers have been. We have physical interventions with Mrs. Rose being at this meeting now and seeing what the numbers were. And we can do that in the future with future meetings, and getting that tangible data can see and quantify what improvement looks like. So thank you for listening and being the audience for this case study. And I leave you with some of the references utilized in this project. Thank you again.